The Bible's most gruesome deaths. Herod's horrific end. In the New Testament, several Herods are mentioned, with Herod Agrippa I, also known as Herod Antipas, being one of them. He was a Roman-appointed ruler in Israel and was responsible for executing John the Baptist. Herod Antipas, referred to as simply Herod, in Acts chapter 4 verse 27, played a part in the execution of Jesus. Herod's demise took place in Caesarea, where he, intoxicated by the people's praises, failed to give glory to God and was struck down by an angel of the Lord, being consumed by worms and dying 5 days later. Acts chapter 12 verse 21-23. This gruesome end was a result of his self-centered pride, symbolizing his spiritual corruption. Jezebel's cruel fate. Jezebel, the infamous queen of Ahab, met a horrifying end. Her wickedness, including the murder of Naboth, brought about her downfall. Jew, an instrument of God's judgment, was coming for her. Instead of hiding in fear, Jezebel defiantly presented herself at a window, painting her face in a futile attempt to intimidate Jew. But her attendants betrayed her, and she was thrown down, just as she had orchestrated Naboth's stoning. Her body was trampled, and her pride and cruelty led to her destruction. Zimri, the short-lived king. Zimri's reign as the fifth king of the northern kingdom of Israel lasted merely 7 days. He assassinated his predecessor, Elah, during a drunken gathering. However, Zimri's rule was short-lived as members of the Israeli army revolted, appointing Omri as their new leader. Zimri was overthrown, ending his reign in just a week. The horror of crucifixion. The Romans perfected crucifixion as a gruesome form of execution, reserving it for the most serious criminals. The victims were subjected to severe beatings, forced to carry the crossbeam to their execution site, stripped naked for further humiliation, and then nailed to the cross. The purpose was to publicly disgrace and torture the victims. This method of execution was perfected by the Romans to deter anyone from challenging their authority. Jesus' agonizing journey to the cross. Jesus' journey to the cross was far from easy. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed to God 3 times, expressing his human desire to avoid the impending suffering. He asked if the cup could pass from him but ultimately surrendered to God's will. His agony in the garden demonstrates his complete commitment to God's plan. He endured the crucifixion, fully understanding the pain and sorrow that awaited him, ultimately sacrificing himself for the redemption of humanity. Jesus' struggle in the garden reflects the human conflict between the desire for righteousness and obedience and the natural aversion to pain and suffering. His example shows that it's normal to wrestle with such conflicts while striving to align with God's will. The power of surrender in the garden. Jesus' experience in the Garden of Gethsemane serves as a powerful example of the conflict between his human nature and his divine mission. He faced the unimaginable weight of what lay ahead: the physical pain, humiliation, and the burden of carrying the sins of the world. When he prayed, "Let this cup pass from me," he expressed the natural human desire to avoid suffering. However, he immediately followed this with, "Yet not as I will, but as you will." In doing so, Jesus fully submitted himself to God's divine will, recognizing that his sacrifice was the only way to redeem humanity. Jesus' unwavering commitment to God's plan, even in the face of overwhelming distress, offers a profound lesson. It shows that during difficult times, we can turn to God, fully acknowledging our own desires and fears while surrendering ourselves to his will. This type of surrender empowers us to endure trials, face adversity, and remain faithful to our higher purpose. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus conquered the flesh and kept it in subjugation to the Spirit. He demonstrated the strength of submission to God's will. When we face challenging moments, we can find comfort in knowing that Jesus understands the struggle of desiring God's will while grappling with the human inclination to avoid suffering. This inner conflict is not a sin but a natural aspect of being human. Jesus' example reminds us of the importance of faith and trust, even when the path is marked by trials and sacrifice. The end of crucifixion. In the history of crucifixion, the Romans perfected this gruesome form of execution. It was employed as a means to publicly disgrace and inflict the utmost physical pain on the victims, typically reserved for the gravest of criminals. Crucifixions were done in public to serve as a deterrent against challenging Roman authority. The victims endured severe beatings, were forced to carry their crossbeam, stripped naked, and then nailed to the cross. The crucifixion was a brutal and horrifying method of execution, but it finally came to an end when the Roman Emperor Constantine outlawed it in the 4th century. This marked the cessation of one of the most gruesome forms of punishment in history. These accounts of gruesome deaths in history and biblical narratives serve as poignant reminders of human nature, the consequences of wickedness, and the power of faith, surrender, and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. They reveal the depths of human suffering and the hope that can arise from the darkest moments of our existence. Herod's downfall as a cautionary tale. Herod's tragic end, brought about by his pride and self-centeredness, serves as a cautionary tale. It illustrates how an individual can become corrupted from the inside out when they focus on their own glory rather than giving due honor to God. Herod's spiritual state was a reflection of his inner corruption, ultimately leading to his demise. The lesson here is that the pursuit of power and self-glory can blind individuals to the true path of righteousness. Jezebel's hubris and its consequences. Jezebel's fate, marked by her defiance and cruelty, underscores the consequences of arrogance and wickedness. Her refusal to humble herself before divine judgment led to her humiliation and destruction. Jezebel's story serves as a reminder that no one, no matter their status, can escape the consequences of their actions when they oppose God's will. Zimri's brief reign and violent end. Zimri's short-lived reign as a king, marked by his treacherous acts and the violent end he faced, highlights the transient nature of earthly power and the repercussions of treachery. Zimri's pursuit of the throne through bloodshed led to his own demise, reminding us that the pursuit of power at the cost of others often results in a bitter end. These historical and biblical accounts of gruesome deaths, whether through divine intervention or human actions, provide valuable lessons on the consequences of pride, cruelty, and the misuse of power. They also emphasize the importance of surrendering to a higher purpose and the ultimate triumph of righteousness over evil. Each story is a reminder of the enduring themes of justice, redemption, and the significance of faith, even in the face of overwhelming challenges.